Welcome to No More Carbon Copies. It's the podcast for high-performing leaders with big goals who feel stuck trying to reach the next level. At Vivera Leadership, we believe no two leaders are the same. The best leaders perform at their highest when they understand what makes them unique and stop trying to lead like someone else. This is where we explore how to see ourselves clearly, address self-sabotage, and lead with clarity, confidence, and purpose. You don't need to be a copy, you just need to be you. Welcome to No More Carbon Copies.
All right, welcome to the No More Carbon Copies podcast. Excited to have Kyle Loretelli with us today. Kyle, thanks for joining the podcast. Those of you who don't know Kyle, let me just say Kyle had a very successful baseball career, even did a stint in the minors, and now has pivoted into this sales role. So for almost 15 years in various leadership roles, and really excited to have Kyle here today. Had the privilege of knowing Kyle for the past few years, and really excited to have this conversation. So Kyle, welcome.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate you, man, and your leadership.
As we jump into this, what we like to do on this podcast is have conversations about the topic of leadership generally. And so today we're going to have some conversation about some of the things that leaders struggle with, or some of the things that cause them to maybe sabotage themselves a little bit. So let's start off talking about the internal mind, the internal kind of dialogue that happens for leaders that sometimes they may not even be aware of, but it really impacts them in a certain way. So whether it's your experience personally or with other folks, talk to me about some of the ways that internal mental battles affect us if we're not aware of them.
You know, I think for me, those types of battles, those internal battles can really start to isolate you as a leader. One thing that I experienced over the years is almost this constant mental overdrive, kind of overthinking everything, conversations, decisions, emails. Should I do this? Should I do that? And ultimately taking a lot of that information and just not talking through it with other individuals, feeling like I needed to have all the answers.
So you're talking about being in your own head and being isolated and thinking through all your decisions, all the things that you're dealing with, but do it in isolation.
Absolutely. Yeah, doing it in isolation, because in leadership, we have this feeling at times where we should have the answers to everything. So you start to question your own capabilities at times when you start to do that, because you're overthinking decisions rather than just acting, because you want to have so much control of the outcomes, which a lot of times we don't have control of that. And what it starts to do, what I notice is it starts to truly suffocate you. It starts to take the strengths that you actually really do have, and it starts to minimize those strengths, which then in turn, you're just very, very limited in your effectiveness in what you're doing or who you're leading, all because of this idea of like, man, I should have the answer. I don't. Let me go try to figure out more information. And then it becomes this paralysis by analysis, eventually to me leading to burnout.
So overdrive, overthinking, and then the assumption that other people think you already should have all the answers. And so you deal with things kind of in a vacuum. I think that's an interesting assumption. You stepped into leadership, and so you assume that you should have all the answers, which ends up kind of making your world smaller rather than your options bigger. So what are some of those assumptions? What are some of those things that you see that either yourself or other leaders you've worked with, what do you think some of those assumptions are that cause folks to become isolated?
You know, as you start to go up as you start to get promotions and you start to get into bigger roles within your organization, there becomes this level of kind of expectancy of yourself of like, okay, I need to know this. The pressure becomes greater. You're put into more moments. You know, when I first started with the company that I started with in 2010 after my baseball career, everybody around me was helping me kind of do everything. And then I think as you grow into that role where now you're that person, you forget about all the things that you did really well to help you get there. And it's almost like you try to mask and now think about all these new strategies and ways to lead people, to do stuff, so I think a lot of those assumptions really, for me, it was this mind game of like, gosh, am I enough? Can I do this job? Like, it was all these comparison, anxiety disguised as being driven. These were all these things that I was dealing with. It was this internal pressure to constantly perform. So for me, it was never, it was always about it never being enough. Man, in being in sales, that is a very common thing, right? We hit a goal and then we're talking 5 minutes later about, all right, what are we doing in 2026? And it's like, gosh, we just hit our goal a week ago. Let's celebrate that. Let's reflect on that. Let's think about the things that help, and that's consistent across most all sales organizations, and that's fine. But I think that there's a piece of that where if we're not careful, we're constantly going to the next thing and then the next thing and the next thing. And it just kind of keeps that cycle going rather than saying, hey, what did we do? What did we do extremely well? What were some of those 1 to 2 things that we did really, really well that helped us? And how can we replicate that this year and continue to lean into that? But I think, again, we are in this culture right now where it is constant comparison. It's very easy to get sucked into that. And I think especially as leaders, going back to the mask stuff we mask, I think we all mask like everything's always going well. And to me, I feel like living proof of myself. I know what that feels like to make it look like it is. And I know most leaders are truly struggling through that.
Yeah. It's interesting because you talked about isolation, and then when you talked about that idea of looking back or celebrating, you're like, what are the things that we did? Which is an interesting that you switched to we when you were talking about isolation. So it seems like in health, you're like, hey, it's a we. We're talking about we did this together. But the tendency is for you and for me and for a lot of people is to think about I. What am I doing? How am I proving myself? How am I making sure I don't look like I'm incompetent or like I don't know the answers?
Yeah.
And so that's interesting the way that you use the word we, pivoted from the word I. How do you maintain that idea of we in the role that you have right now, your organization? How have you learned? What disciplines have you learned to try to not be as isolated as you have in the past?
I think 2023 was probably when I hit the ceiling of, gosh, I've been operating like this for 12 years. I hit what I would consider in my career a very marker moment of my career. And it was a burnout moment. It was a moment of like, gosh, I cannot keep operating like this for 10, 15, 20 more years. And what that was, and I mentioned this earlier, is that was this, people saw me as this driver, and truly inside I was stressed out of my mind. I was anxious all the time. For me now, here's what this looks like. When I start to feel those same feelings of anxiety, of stress, of feeling like, gosh, I'm not thinking clearly, my brain's foggy, I'm like, dude, I'm not operating very effectively right now. It's the awareness of knowing that that's starting to happen and triggering that I need to bring other people into this. Because what I realized through this process is that when we start to do that, we start to realize there are so many other people that are aspiring leaders, leading companies that are doing those things that are in the exact same boat. It's the fact that a lot of us, I think, are just afraid to talk about it, to go back to the other point of like, because we're all in one way, shape, or form comparing ourselves to the next person. Is that going to show weakness if I go and have that conversation? Some of the most rich conversations I've had in the last 2 years working through this process is bringing those people in and being able to learn from those people, and me walking out of those conversations and feeling like, man, I was able to bring something to that conversation that helped that person. So I think this is where this we conversation. So when you think about leading a team, I found, again, going from this isolation of feeling like the leader, I need to have it all together, bringing my team more into those conversations, created this level not only of trust of, I mean, it humanizes you as a leader to your people. It builds your culture. It makes you as a leader not feel so isolated. Truly, it took a lot of this hidden exhaustion that I was feeling, and I was feeling it behind this just like productivity. I got to do it all myself, to this different level of joy of like, this is why I want to lead. This is why I'm in the role that I'm in, or this is why I'm aspiring to be in this role. Because those lessons learned over the last 2 to 3 years for me are things that, man, like, they're very common. People deal with that stuff all the time. And I'm finally starting to grasp what it feels like on the other side.
Yeah, well, you said a lot there. And so I want to follow up on it. What you said was this idea that you're having conversations and saying, say, some people may actually respond to this as thinking you're weak, or some people may respond to your vulnerability or admission that you're struggling as being a weakness. But it sounds like it's been the opposite of that. It sounds like as you've had conversations with people about, hey, these places that I don't have all the answers, or I am struggling, it sounds like the responses you've gotten from people have been different than you're weak, and been more like, hey, yeah, let's have more conversations about this, because me too, I am as well. Have you ever had anybody who has responded negatively to that sense of, hey, let's talk about the places that I'm struggling, or hey, can I get your opinion on this, or can you help me out?
No, again, it's been the complete opposite. And I think if I could sum it up into a phrase around, like, when I look at 3 years ago Kyle, who was operating like that for 12 years, to where I'm at now. And mind you, now I'm back kind of in this producer sales role, but the term leadership has changed. I never looked at leadership like I do now, right? I'm in a sales role. I have peers that I work with, but I have that opportunity every single day to go in and lead other salespeople, other people that work side by side with me currently right now. And I think that if I could sum it into one phrase, what has changed is the release of control has changed everything. And I'm going to throw the control word in there, because I think that what I was doing to mask some of the stuff previously is I was the ultimate planner, micromanager of my own self, of my own expectations of what I needed to create, because I felt like if I can write the perfect strategy and the perfect to-do list and the perfect this, and here's my goals, if I could do that well enough, I'd feel good about myself for a short minute. But what it was creating was this anxiety of, they talk about anxiety, right? Your fight or flight, or is just freeze, right? I was a freezer. I was like, gosh, I could come up with the best plan, but dude, man, I was afraid to go operate and execute on those plans, because it took way too much time to do all the things. I didn't have enough extra time in my day. So there was this aspect of just releasing control that I had to learn some very valuable techniques that I'm still working on to this day. I mean, it's like these daily habits of, I got 30 things on my to-do list, and actually 25 of those really aren't that important. Let's focus on these 5. I mean, that's a daily thing. So releasing control, and what it allowed me to do as a leader that has changed everything, or just as a person, Roger, like, it's allowed me to be present. And when I'm present, the strengths, the things that I have that are unique to me actually aren't being suffocated, and they get to come out.
So that concept of the idea of showing up, being present, and then having your natural ability show up with you is kind of just relaxing into that, and then and you naturally perform, versus the idea of the anxiety of having everything under your thumb, and constantly being anxious about how you show up, about what other people think, about getting everything done, about following the perfect thing. When you're thinking about that, it distracts you from actually the place that you are, the interaction that you're currently having, that makes you, and what makes you effective in that.
Yeah, it's the shifting of, like, constantly striving to just being present, and just allowing, again, releasing the control of the outcomes. Because again, I can have a sales goal for the year 2026. I can have that. If I'm sitting and just ruminating on all the things that I need to be doing, and I'm thinking about that goal constantly, ultimately, the only control I have of hitting that goal is is living out a process of what is it going to take? What are the 3 to 5 things that I need to be doing very disciplined, consistent day to day? That's the stuff to focus on, right? It's like if I have an employee that is trying to hit a sales goal, it is driving the behaviors that are going to help them get to that goal. But it's not just putting that pressure of you need to hit that goal, you need to hit that. So it is a lot different when you start to release like, hey, I'm confident if we do this well, we're going to have a good shot. And then just kind of releasing that and playing a little bit more free. I mean, when I take it back to baseball, and being able to draw these these lines to sports has been very helpful for me. But when I was at my best playing baseball, you hear baseball terms of like not gripping the bat, playing loose. It's the same thing in business. It's the exact same thing. When I was at my best in baseball in my career, it was being in those big moments where I couldn't control. We had runners at first and second. I couldn't control whether or not I was going to hit that runner in from second, but I could trust the process and the time and the work that I put in to go into the batter's box and be like, I've got this. And then let the outcomes kind of take care of themselves.
Yeah. Well, so many more things we could talk about in terms of those sports analogies that you practice, you put in all this work, now relax and perform versus bring the anxiety in there of like, I must achieve X. One of the things I go back to, and this is a little bit of a pivot, but not much, I think we'll go back to it, is one of the things I've heard you say that you do, even in sales, is, you're going to a sales meeting and you're having a lunch with someone and you go in and instead of just selling or do whatever, you kind of like put that on the back burner and you're having a human to human conversation and then have a great year, right? Like, talk to me about that mental process, how you shifted from being like, hey, I'm going to network and do all the activity I need to do to sell versus, hey, I'm going to go be a human with a human.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of people that could do what I do selling wise. I can take 20, 30 salespeople and go teach them all the material of the specific things that we sell. And over time, if we all spoke the same way, we would all sound the same. To me, that puts me in a box and makes my competition much greater. What's unique to every individual is them specifically, right? So what I have found in sales is the most successful years, if I was to reflect back, whether leading a team or being in sales, it was the years that I didn't try to over manufacture conversations. And that doesn't mean I'm not upskilling on the back end. That doesn't mean I'm not progressing certain leadership traits. That doesn't mean I'm not doing that stuff. That just means when I get in the moment, I'm not thinking about all of these things. I hit off the tee in baseball, right? Let's say I take a couple hundred swings on a Monday. Well, Tuesday's game rolls around. I'm not thinking, when I walk into the box, I'm not thinking about all my mechanics. I'm keeping my mind as simple as possible and I'm trying to be as relaxed as I can. So when you talk about conversations, when I'm in front of a potential customer, man, my best asset is going to be myself, is going to be building trust in relationships with the person across the table from me. And we may not talk business at all, but what I found is some of my best relationships over the 15 years have been people, some of them I've never done business with, but some of them have turned into some of the best business relationships ever. And it started with just getting to know them as a person and being able to let my guard down a little bit, even in the beginning, building trust by being a little bit more vulnerable from the beginning with like, hey, I'm a human too. And I know you are. And this is right. And it's just having those conversations where I feel like we have lost sight of the value. In that unfortunately starts to feed into this, I've got to be a certain person. And it's like, no, you gotta just be yourself. And if you could do that really well, you not only play more loose, you work with more joy. And that is life. That to me that's the way that this was meant to be. And I think that for me over the years, learning that my true authentic self, being who I am, has led me to more opportunities than when I was trying to be somebody that I wasn't.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I think we've talked about is just that different mindset. And for so many years, I myself, and I see a lot of people do it, is they go, "Oh, I'm aspiring, and so I'm going to choose someone who I think, or a few people that I want to be like, and I'm going to try to, as much as I can, be them. I'm going to squeeze myself into the mold that I see as being successful. And in the process, lose that idea of authenticity. You lose like being yourself. So you don't show up with all your skill set. You're showing up and you're performing and pretending to be like these people who are different than you, but are successful and you want to be like. And so what you're talking about is forget that. Really just show up and be yourself and do the job, the same job somebody else is doing. It's a sales job, it's a sales job. But the way that the next salesperson is going to do it is going to be different than the way you do it because you're relying on your, what I say, conscious competence. You're relying on the things that you are conscious of, that you know you do really well, and not pretending or trying to be someone who is not you.
That's it. Going back to some of the control stuff, it's very easy as as a leader to kind of to get into your own head, and you're expecting this specific outcome to come from this meeting you have in 30 minutes. And because of that, you're going into this conversation with this expectation. And if it doesn't happen, you're now questioning why and this, rather than taking that 30 minutes prior in preparation to calm yourself, to kind of figure out, hey, how do I go in there and release control of what's going to happen, but just how do I best prepare myself to go in and do what I know to do best? Or how do I just relax and be myself going into this conversation with this employee? So I think it's just a shift for me. It was just a shift in mindset of what's going to happen is going to happen. And I think if I can prepare myself differently than being so consumed about, man, I need to lock this deal up, or man, I want that employee to walk out of the office feeling inspired. Or like when I started to get away from that, it freed me up. And it allowed me in those conversations to be more adaptive, to be a better listener, to be more present, which ultimately made me more effective and then closed more deals.
Yeah, I'm reflecting back on a conversation I had earlier this week. Like when you talk about that, I'm like, hey, boy, that's me. Earlier this week, I had a conversation, networking conversation, kind of trying to see kind of what might come of it. And I was so stressed coming into it that I was like, oh, I've got to prove my chops. I've got to prove myself in this. So my focus was on how do I impress this person that's on the phone? And so all my focus was on me. It was a train wreck. The conversation was a train wreck. I was stressed. I didn't listen well. Didn't ask good questions. Wasn't present in the moment and talked too much. All those kind of things. And realized coming out of it, that's exactly what you're just talking about. The perspective being on me and being on my anxiety about how I come off. And it derailed the conversation because I wasn't open to where that individual I was talking to wanted to go, what they were interested in, what they really struggled with. I didn't even, and so I missed the opportunity. Contrast that with a conversation I had another couple days ago, where I went in and was like, oh, I think this is going to go in this direction, but let's make sure. And all of a sudden it went to a much different direction with a much bigger opportunity because I was more open. So I have these two recent experiences of what you just talked about.
Yeah, it's like leading from confidence and preparation in the process that you've already put into place. It's leading from more of a restful state compared to leading from fear. And it brings me back when I started in sales in 2012. I can remember one of the first meetings I ever had, and I went in there with a to-do list, very similar to what you just said, because I wanted to control the outcome so bad. I had a list of 20 questions. And here, mind you, I'm going into a conversation to discover and understand what the business problems are so I can provide a solution. And we've got multiple solutions in the world that I'm in. So it's really hard to do that, to go in with this agenda. And what happened is bullet point 2 that I had the conversation went in a completely different direction, and I froze, rather than, going in there with an approach more around like, I need to ask maybe one or two really good questions to see what they want to talk about. So it's a very different mindset and a very different approach. And it's one that I think fear stops us from doing that a lot of times, because deep down inside, a lot of us aren't as confident in ourselves as we portray ourselves to be. And we feel like, hey, well, if they take it in this direction, or if they say this, but I haven't ever been in a conversation, I feel like, where, it's like, hey, if I don't have the answer, sometimes that's it. It's just being honest of saying, hey, I don't know that answer, but I can get you that answer. And that's never, to me, has never lost me an opportunity or a deal, but yet in the back of your head, sometimes we have this expectation of, we've got to know everything.
So you just triggered a thought in my mind about what I've noticed about myself, and that is when I'm in a hurry and I want to do something quickly, is when I tend to have the least effective or productive conversations, because I'm trying to run through something. And even as take an example from parenting, most leaders are parents. There's a sense of like, hey, we talk a lot about our kids. I learn a lot about myself from my parenting and my parenting failures. And so I just had an experience the other day. One of my kids said one thing that what they said was the complete and total picture. And so I reacted, went in to talk to the other child, and didn't even listen, didn't ask any questions, wasn't curious, and just kind of said, like, assumed I knew everything and totally got it wrong. And it's not that the one child was being dishonest. It's that I didn't really understand the perspective of the other child. And when I think about that related to the business world, is when I assume that I already know what someone is dealing with and what their problems are, and the things that are causing them, the things that they're concerned about today. When I assume I know those and I just start talking as though I know those, the wall just gets put up, and there's a huge disconnect.
Absolutely.
And again, it's not that we're not trying to sell. It's not that we're not trying to be productive. We're not trying to be effective. We're not trying to add value in the world. It's that our approach is not as staccato. It's not as one-sided. There's a sense of much more human engagement.
I mean, that's it. And I think that you can't prepare enough for that. Stuff changes every single day between every interaction you have. So this is going back again to outcomes. It's like today's going to look different than yesterday did, with the conversation I have with this employee in 30 minutes compared to the one I had yesterday at 9:00. It's just going to look different. And I think that this is where, like, the active listening and the playing a little bit more loose, this audible ready sense, compared to I need to have it all figured out. And for me, a lot of the anxiety started to go away when that started to happen. Now it creeps back a lot, but it's like, man, the awareness of knowing why that's happening and being able to sit and reflect and be like, oh, you know what? I'm trying to manufacture the outcome. I'm overthinking this. I'm over planning this. My day was going in this direction and now it's going in this direction. Well, you know what? It's because, like, gosh, I feel like a failure now because it's not going in the direction that I said that it was going to go in today. I mean, it's like all of that stuff, challenges us as leaders. And I think the most effective ones are the ones that ultimately become very aware of how they self-sabotage themselves and are able to not be perfect, but something that maybe took them 3 hours to get out of their head now takes them 30 minutes.
Yeah, that's my experience too, is both for myself and for the folks that I work with. The volume never gets turned 100% down on those voices that in our head communicate negativity to us, or communicate failure to us, or shame, or whatever. Those voices never go away. So we have to have the disciplines to remind ourselves regularly that what's true. And whether it's, I know you've done this in the past. I've done it, having a morning ritual where you're reminding yourself, hey, here's what I'm about. Here's what I'm doing. Here's how grounded I am. And Brene Brown talks about being grounded, and that concept of just being grounded on your foundation, to me, means a lot to me. And so daily reminding myself, here's the foundation you stand on. Speak and engage with people from this foundation, and release demand or the control. like you're talking about. And what I find is better things happen. Like my
Absolutely.
imagination is not even good enough.
Absolutely. Well, and I have one quick example of again, and this is where what we're going to never get to a point to where it's like, man, I've got it all figured out. Right. I think as a leader for a long time, I thought that was the case, like where I'm like, gosh, I'm just not there yet. And one day it's just going to click. And then all of a sudden all my problems are going to be gone. It's like, no, what happened was I started to become uber aware of, like I said, how I self-sabotage myself, how I could listen better in specific conversations, or I can, listen for the specific needs of this client in this conversation or this employee, and to relate it to personal stuff like kids, right? Good example was this morning, and you can take this and look at this as like leading an office of 30, 40 people. I've got my routine, my morning stuff, and the last 3 days have been great. I wake up early. I've got an hour of like just quietness for myself. Kids are still sleeping. No distractions. This morning, I woke up a little later. I woke up ready to still engage in my stuff and read and do the things. Kids got up earlier. So all of a sudden, I found myself with this kind of performance, like I got to get through this because I know it starts my day, to all these disruptions, and then all this kind of shame of like, you should have got up earlier. Oh, you didn't do this. All this stuff started triggering. I got to a point where I'm like, no, like this was meant to happen exactly how it's happening right now. Like my kids are up. They need my attention. What are their needs right now? And think about when employees, when things happen throughout the day and you're leading a group of people, and I'm like, gosh, I got to get in my office. But man, there's this employee that needs something in a moment, and it disrupts everything in that moment for you. I think a lot of us spiral. I mean, I was spiraling this morning at first, and then I caught it, and I'm like, nope, it's not about all of this right now. Like it's about this moment with my daughter or my son who just needs some attention to understand what they're going through this morning so that I can help empower them to go do what they need to do today. Like it's those moments, and those examples hit me. I feel like that's where it doesn't end. But what's cool about this is when you start to see this stuff, that's what life is all about. Is like you're going to have these highs and you're going to have these lows, and you're going to have these breakthrough moments where for me this morning, that was a little breakthrough moment, because me 4 or 5 years ago would have probably allowed that disruption to hijack half, if not the rest of my day, which ultimately hijacks all the people I come into contact.
Yeah, that gets back to the idea of trying to micromanage or control everything about your day, about your activity, and then life happens, things happen, they throw you off, and all of a sudden you're off that track, and you just punt the whole day and restart tomorrow. No, yep. You've got to be able to hold it with an open hand and go, oh yeah, I can plan. No one's saying not to plan. I can plan, but I also know mentally there's going to be interruptions, and I got to show up. I got to ask the question of how can I be a blessing, or how can I help in these interruptions? Yeah. Love the concepts of relaxing, trusting your preparation, not being so stressed, and trying to be controlling, and just being present with people, being present to have conversations, to look at what they need. Super helpful, and the idea that our mental thoughts sabotage us, and becoming aware. So, last question for you: what's the most helpful thing that you do? What's a ritual that you do to remind yourself or put yourself at ease when you're thinking about minimizing the amount of self-sabotage that has happened in the past? And what do you do?
Yeah, I mean, so I would say over the last probably year and a half, I've gotten extremely disciplined in just my morning routine. And morning routine being just giving myself space to have silence, to have a quiet moment. And that over the year, I guess, has become that grounding space for me to really center me on a lot of the things we're talking about. Like, it's not to go wake up and plan out my day for the whole day. It's not to create more of that stress and anxiety. It's like, no, I'll get to that. This is the time that I block aside to just get up and be silent, to read, to pray, to think about, how can I release control today? Hey, man, my identity is not based on how I perform today. Like it's to ground those truths into me so that I can go execute in my day. And what I found is that when I was doing that sporadically, it just wasn't enough, because again, you don't figure this out and then all of a sudden all your problems are gone. That would be really easy. It's hard work. And I think the biggest advice that I can give to people would be taking care of you first, right? So me in the morning, that's me taking care of my needs and the things that I need first, have a lasting impact on how my day ends up going. So I would say make time for yourself. And I have 4 young kids. So I've got a 12-year-old all the way down to a 3-year-old. So in order to create that time, it's like, and today I told you was disrupted, but in most days it's not, because I'm trying to get to bed early and wake up at a very early hour so I can get that time in.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that. Take the time to reground yourself in who you are so that you can actually show up and be you and not just be reactive.
That's right.
Yeah. Love it. Well, Kyle, thanks for joining us on the podcast. Really appreciate it. And for those who are curious about Kyle, go check out his LinkedIn. Kyle is one of the folks I love your heart. I love the way that you pursue life. I love the way that you go after your ambition, and I love that you're embracing who you are. So thanks for sharing the path with me in life, and thanks for joining us on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to No More Carbon Copies. If today's episode challenged your thinking or sparked a new idea, we'd love for you to share it or leave a review. And if you want to go deeper, take the free Leadership Blind Spots Diagnostic. It's a quick tool that helps you identify the hidden patterns holding you back and gives you practical insight to grow your leadership and your team. Just head to viveroleadership.com/diagnostic or use the QR code on the screen to take it now. We'll see you next time. Until then, lead true.